Last week I was doing a pretty cool trip, actually about a week and a half ago. And it was the last trip right before my training event, my R12, which is now every 12 months we got a retraining cycle. So R12, 12-month training cycle. And I did a little bit of studying. I cracked some books. I pulled out all my notes. I have a notebook that is dedicated only for recurrent training and training. And so I have all my notes in there from the very beginning, from new hire class. So every time I go, I would just keep writing the notes, to rewrite them, and it's a
Right.
way.
Review what you have. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's been a while since I had the last few observations, and
Hmm.
so it was a good place. Plus, I went online and looked at all the recurrent information that was posted on both the Legacy website and airbusdriver.net. We've talked about that on the show too. It's a
Yeah.
third-party website that they update like what the latest and the greatest is from the rumor mill, the gouge, as one would call it. And so I felt relatively prepared, but as we've mentioned many times before, I have PTSD from the sandpiper training that we all received. That respect the stick. You will be hit on the knuckle with the stick if you do not press the
Yeah.
button. I was like, what? Ow!
Yeah. Yeah. We all have that, I
We all
think.
had that. So the week before that, I flew a really cool trip into Fort Walton Beach.
Hmm.
So it was, I think it was LA to Dallas, Dallas, Fort Walton Beach, if I remember correctly. And I hadn't been there in a while, since Sandpiper days. This was my first time flying in there under the Legacy livery. And I had a really, real top-notch captain flying with me, and it was my leg. So I briefed the arrival, what we expected. Um, we talked about they keep you high, and they chop you and drop you. Let's be prepared for that. Okay. We're going to be doing an ILS to runway 19 in visual conditions, and they might clear us the visual. We'll just do our best to get fully configured by the final approach fix in case they slow us way down. There is intensive jet training and jet exercises going on there, military aircraft. So our head will be on a swivel. Plus, on top of that, there's a lot of GA traffic around the area too, along the beach. So we were ready. And as we were starting our descent, again, we were a little high because they keep you high. They said, well, hey, can you accept the visual to 1-2? And like, yeah, sure. We talked about this as being a possibility. Let's accept the visual 1-2. So they gave us a radar vector. And the radar vector, while we were getting the radar vector, we were still on autopilot, just above 10,000 feet. We're like, hey, let's plug in runway 12 here, back it up with the instrument approach. And I talked about it, and we talked about the arresting cable, because they have military training there. They have an arresting cable that sits on
Hmm.
rubber donuts just above the surface of the asphalt or the runway. And so there are ops pages or operations pages that our company has published in our Jeppesen manual that indicates that when you're coming in to land, if the cables on the ATIS or the controller tells you that the cables are raised or up, that means that the cable is sitting on the top of the runway surface on these orange donuts, flanked on either side by big yellow circles, and sometimes the buildings as well. So if that's the case, try landing just beyond that, and the runway numbers for that are also published on the 10-9 chart. So we
Hmm.
briefed all of that. We had plenty of runway. We had to do a landing assessment because it's non-normal. You don't normally land past the aiming point markers, but you're still within the first third of the runway or first 3,000 feet, whatever it is, shorter. So we're like, great. And as we started our descent, I had just finished the brief, and the controller says, you know what, Legacy, we changed our mind. It's going to be a visual, runway 19, fly to the outer marker, you're clear of the visual. Okay, no problem. So since we're below 10, I had the captain plug that into the FMGC or the FMS, and we're like, okay, I verified the waypoints. Go ahead and extend me off that final approach fix, and we're cleared the visual. Let's start to get configured, and as previously briefed. And We are at 1,500 feet, and they say, we have an aircraft disabled on the runway. Can you accept the circle to land visual runway 12? We're like, absolutely. So it was all asses and elbows, my friend. I
Yeah.
immediately clicked the autopilot off, turned the flight directors both off, I had him pull the altitude hold feature, and then I said, all right, give me a heading. I'm going to snap to this heading. It was basically a 45-degree entry to a visual downwind at 1,500 feet. And he's like, oh, sweet. So, okay, and pull heading. I said, pull the speed, dial it back to a certain speed so I could start to slow to get fully configured. As soon as we were midfield downwind, the gear came down. We went to flaps 2. And before we turned base leg, I was at flaps 3, fully configured, and the landing checklist was complete. Completely did a visual approach, raw data, and he actually had time to push a couple buttons on the flight management computer, and he actually extended me off of runway 12. And on the Airbus, you'll learn that if you go in flight directors off, raw data, autopilot off, you press the track, or the bird, we call it, the track button. So instead of heading and altitude, it gives you a track and a flight path angle. And there's a little green dot on the right side where the ILS normally would be displayed. And that green dot is a 3-degree glide path from the runway threshold that the computer gives you some kind of reference. So you always have a reference, even when you're raw data. And
Nice.
it was one of the nicest, cleanest, dare I say, visual approaches to a circle to land on a base downwind pattern. And landed just beyond the arresting cables, and it was a nice turn off. And the captain's like, damn, dude, you're like, you're ready for that simulator, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
So
because a lot of people don't realize visual approaches are a little more challenging in heavy jets than they are in smaller general aviation airplanes. Not that to say that they can't be done with ease, just that the sight pictures are not normal. I mean, because most of the time we're using lateral and vertical guidance pretty much all the way down to the runway from from usually 100 miles out, starting with the arrival. So descending from the flight levels down to the airport, we're given altitudes and headings and airspeeds, or we're following those procedures on a published procedure. So by the time we get down to the runway, I mean, everything is pretty much already pre-planned for us. So when we're given just a raw, there's the airport, go land on it, it turns into a different ball of wax, because those normal cues or normal checkpoints or fixes, or lateral or vertical guidance symbols just aren't there. Well, I mean, they're there, but they're not as I forget. I'm here a lack of terms or words for it, but they're not used, or they're not in oh, I hate when I get like this, but they're not used in conjunction with the auto flight and and everything that we have in the airplane. So because the 737 is the same way. If you just do raw data, I mean, not even raw data, if you just do a visual approach, I mean, good luck.
I think when the normal symbology is presented on the PFD, or the primary flight display, when the normal symbology is displayed and you have a path, you have vertical guidance, you have horizontal guidance, you have airspeed guidance, you have everything's laid out for you with normal symbology, even with the autopilot off on a hand-flown approach, you know what to expect, you know what it should look like, and you have over 1,000 points of reference helping you out, making sure that you're on speed, on path, and on guidance. When you shut all of that off and go to the lowest level of automation, and it's a glass cockpit, and so now all the normal symbology has disappeared, and now you're looking at a different symbology that you maybe see possibly only when you're in the simulator. I mean, it just depends upon how often you try to go out of your comfort zone to do these things. So to be able to shoot a clean visual approach that is not just a straight in with the flight path angle of 3 degrees and you could do the math. Great, good for you. You know your 3-to-1 rule. Great.
Hmm.
But when you're doing this and you're doing a downwind and you have to judge your ground speed, what direction the wind's coming from, do I have enough distance from the runway to make a nice clean turn, or am I going to overshoot the final? Am I going to undershoot? Then am I going to end up high
Right.
or low? So
Low, hot,
execute
fast, slow. Yeah.
maneuvers, this is just what it really is, to a landing, and it comes out like that. I mean, you know,
That's yeah.
I'm not to try to toot my own horn, but even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while. I'm just saying,
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, it probably helped that you did a little GA flying earlier too in the week, I think, last week. So that probably helped out a lot.
We're going to get to that. That was after.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, that was after. Yeah, yeah. So it was a fantastic layover in Fort Walton Beach.
Cool.
The sugar sand, the really fine white
Yeah, it's
sand,
nice.
the Gold
It's like a
Coast
flower.
of the Gulf
Yeah.
Coast. Everything was
Oh,
open. Masks were optional if you were fully
nice.
vaccinated. No one had a mask on that was fully vaccinated. We were able to go to dinner. The captain and I went
Cool.
to the crab. I think it was called the Crab Stick or the Crab Shack or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Oh my God! It was sit outside
Cool.
patio, watch the freaking sun go down, have a
Yeah,
couple adult beverages, and talk about good times. Man, it doesn't
that's awesome.
get any better than that. There's a new
That's
appreciation
awesome.
for it, actually.
Yeah, man. And oh, by the way, that cable system that you were speaking about earlier, that you had the land pass and everything. Yeah, that's called the Bach 12, and sometimes they combine it with a Bach 14. BAK. It's a arrestor barrier system that's I think it's made by a company called Fairlead. Um, I'm sorry, Aviation Alliance, but um, they're called Bach 12 and Bach 14. So basically it's a cable system that the Air Force and Air National Guard use at all these airports that to trap Air Force fighter jets whenever they have an emergency situation that involves the inability to stop the aircraft. And so it's just like a Navy airplane landing on an aircraft carrier uses one every time. The Air Force jets only use them when they have to in an emergency. And I've seen many airplanes use that system over the years when I was enlisted, from F-111s, F-4s, F-16s, and it's fun to watch. It's exciting because it doesn't happen every day, and it's usually when they're getting ready to use that cable, they've declared an emergency, so all the fire trucks, first responders are out, and all the safety officer of flight, or they call it the SOF. They're out there um, watching and managing the scene and everything like that, and it can get pretty exciting because you know that's something that they practice, but a lot of things can go wrong taking those barriers. If you mess something up. So anyway, they're designed to stop a fighter aircraft, but they're also designed so that um, aircraft like the ones we fly, they can actually land on top of them. Well, I wouldn't say on top of them, land and roll over them and not cause any damage or problems with the aircraft, other than a big thump. It's like a mini speed bump in a runway.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to some
I'll
information
send it to you.
about systems. The next day, I was doing my walk around. It was a kickoff flight, doing my walk around, and I heard something very cool. It was an F-22, or actually a pair of F-22s, getting ready for takeoff. So
Yeah.
I shot a couple videos and then put them on the Squawk Ident podcast social media there on Instagram and Facebook, and so it was really cool to get to see that. And that's when I was reminded that, oh yeah, there's arresting cables out there. So when I got back in the airplane,
Mm-hmm.
I was perusing the flight release, our digital copy of, what is it, 50 pages per flight of information
Mm-hmm.
and all this performance numbers and everything that's there. But on there, our performance numbers did say that all performance numbers for runway 12, which is what we were departing on, have the takeoff roll starting after the arresting cables when they're up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even some instructions in our operations page that say on departure, you want to use taxi thrust until you've gone over the cables with the mains, and then roll it into a takeoff thrust setting, and your performance numbers are good from that point. There's a photo that I took. I took a quick photo as we were taxiing and was able to snap one out real quick, and I'll post that on there. And it's about 1,500 feet down the runway.
Yeah.
You can see it kind of past
See it there at the marker. Yeah.
Yeah.
See
So
the little donuts too to hold it up.
yep, and it was a little good da dump as we crossed,
Yeah.
and then sure enough, we went from there. So
Cool.
really cool experience. And by the time we got back to Dallas, that was it. Dallas back to LA, and we were done.
Nice, man.
We had a day off.
That's an exciting day. And you had one day off.
One day off. I
Oh,
repacked
geez.
the laundry, repacked, got everything ready, got out all my notebooks and everything, and had to pack not for a trip, but for my DFW training.
Aha.
So went in DFW, got to the hotel, rented a car, and ended up having an experience, having the opportunity to drive out to the Denton Airport, just north of Dallas, where I had a meetup with our very own Christy Wong, CFI, Gold Seal CFI. If you remember back on episode 74,
Yeah.
entitled A Warrior and a Pilot, we learned about how Christy Wong, who was a clinical allergist, decided, I really want to fly airplanes. I've loved airplanes since I was a little girl, and here she is, living
Great story. Yeah.
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 So if you want to know more about that and you haven't checked that out yet, or you're new to the podcast, definitely go back and take a listen. She gave me a tour of her home airport. She brought some barbecue with her. I mean, come on.
Cool.
Here I am, like at her invite to
Taking care of her guests. That's awesome.
I'm like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be doing the buy-in here. You're taking me up to the barbecue, and
wow.
Well, she actually had a student that was getting ready for stage check for his instrument rating. And so he was going to go up with a friend of hers, another CFI. And so they did a little pre-briefing. And then once they were on their way, we went and toured her hangar. And she has a 1981 Piper Cherokee Warrior II. It's sporting a Lycoming O360. It's got 180 horsepower STC power plant. And it's a certified IFR instrument cluster that includes a Garmin 650. The aircraft is meticulously maintained and hangar kept, and it's part of the Arrow Valley Flying Club, where Christy Wong is the president. So she's like, all right, help me get it out of the hangar and hop in, let's go.
Cool.
I gotta tell you, Rob, it was tailwind was the last time I set a GA airplane. Tailwind.
Wow. That was what, 2007, 2006?
At the end of 2006. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So
how was it?
Oh, you know what? It brought back this. I don't think I stopped smiling for a good 4 hours. She is just so professional. We got in there. She gave me a quick safety brief, and we were off. She's like, "You want to taxi it?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, yeah, like you want to go up on the run up, right? We got to do a mag check. She's like, "Yeah, good. You remember? Yeah." So yeah. So we went up and we went into this little practice area. She gave me a tour of where she flies, and we had a wonderful conversation just about 2,500 feet over the Denton area. And thunderstorms were rolling in. We were actually afraid we weren't going to be able to fly. But the weather kind of really fizzled out
for you. Yeah.
A bunch of people, canceled their instruction, and
because
so
of the weather.
The whole freaking area to ourselves.
Sweet.
And she's got the TCAS and the tablet with the really cool
like flight aware something or whatever.
ForeFlight, yeah. It's kind of like
a
GA version of Jeppesen. So she'd look at her tablet and be like, "Oh, there's somebody over here that's not doing altitude reporting. Let's stay away from them." And "Oh, there's somebody over here 2 miles ahead of us." Total TCAS live.
Wow,
that's
cool
overlay and everything. And I was like, "Damn, this is like more advanced." So,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Did some impossible turns, came back and she had me do the first landing. She didn't demonstrate. I was like, okay, keep an eye on me now. Don't let me embarrass myself. And of course, I flared too high. One finger on the control. She's like, nope, it's over. Nope.
Not yet, not yet, not yet.
I'm like, oh my god!
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Just then it went. Eek, click, click. Like, holy crap! I feel like we're sitting on the ground.
Sitting on the runway.
So she's like, okay, touch and go. Here we go. Let's go. Flat.
Oh man,
Full.
that's that. When I was teaching at Tailwind, I had checked out 2 British Airways 747 pilots, and so I was checking them out in the 182 that they had, and when we were coming in for the first landing, he's like, oh, what speed should I maintain? I was like, oh, between 80 and 85. That's a good approach speed with, flaps 10 or something like that. And he's like, okay. And as we approached like 200 feet, he was saying, oh my gosh, I really, really want to flare right about now. And I'm like, no, we're still 200 feet in the air. We haven't even got over the runway yet. He's like, I know, but in the 747, this is about the point where we're starting to slow and flare. And I'm like, really? He's like, no, yeah. And he's like, yeah, just watch me closely. And we got to about 100 feet, and he starts pulling the power back to idle. And I'm like, no, keep it in. Keep the nose down. And it wasn't that exciting, but that was still still coaching him down. And then finally, we got into the landing flare, and we floated a little long because he didn't know when the flare. But yeah, we got it on the ground. I was like, all right, let's go do it again. And by the second, third time, he had it down packed. But yeah, man, that was fun.